Hey everyone, and welcome back to Deeper Roots. At IBBVN, one of the priorities of the church is its youth ministry. We see the youth ministry as not only the future of the local church, but the future of the church in general. Being one of the people on the team that leads the youth ministry, I can say that it is difficult to be in that leadership position, considering that the teens in the youth group are a complete generation away from me. I'm just 23 years old, and I'm not that far from their age, but I can already see and feel the differences between my culture and the teens' culture. One aspect of leadership is to be able to deal with the issues as they come up between the teens. This is confrontations, possible fights, the unity between the members, and so much more. But over everything is their spiritual lives. When anything starts falling apart around them, sometimes their faith takes a hit. So today's question is all about that. How do we resolve conflicts within the youth group? I will note that the question initially submitted was worded differently, but we hope that we got the spirit of the question correct. We talk about and acknowledge the possibility of unfair treatment and biblical ways to resolve conflicts between teens and how it is different between teens and adults. This question was submitted online using the form on our webpage, www.ibbvn.org/deeperroots. If you'd like to submit a question of your own, please, you can do so with that link. And you can also find the link in the description as well. If you like the podcast and you want to help support us, please share the podcast. Thank you for joining us here on Deeper Roots. Let's get to the conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to Deeper Roots. I want to thank everyone for joining us. My name is Derek. Today we have Pastor Luis here as well. We also have Esther, and our guest today is Hermana Margarita. Hermana Margarita is one of the leaders in our youth group, Anchored at Heart, and we are very appreciative that she's here. She usually is a bit microphone shy, so we very much appreciate that she's here. And the reason why we're talking, the reason why we have Hermana Margarita here specifically today is because we have a question about a youth group. Today's question was submitted online, and the question is, how do we resolve conflicts within the youth group? I want to go ahead and start, Pastor.
All right. Thank you, Derek. This question is a very important question to deal with, so I'm so glad to have Hermana Margarita here today. And the actual wording of the question that was submitted was a little bit different in the sense that it seems like one of our listeners is going through a certain issue where it seems like conflict was not resolved correctly. Mm-hmm. We're not sure if this is someone from our church or not. But we just wanted to take the opportunity to discuss what is the biblical way or the biblical method through which we should resolve conflict. Now, before we get to that, because we could just go to that immediately, let's just open it up a little bit. And I'll just ask Hermana Margarita today, since she's here, when it comes to conflict, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen made when it comes to conflict resolution, which ends up either making things worse or or completely just maybe bottling things up and making things worse down the line? What are some of the things you've seen?
I think before I start, I want to say thank you, Pastor and Derek and Esther, for allowing me to be here today. I'm very thankful to God. And so the big question, right? How do we resolve conflict? And we know that in everything we do, there's conflict. But it's how we approach it. First, I think we need to bring it to the person where the conflict exists. If I'm not aware of conflict can become gossip, mm-hmm. and it starts spreading outside where it's supposed to be brought up to. So I think it's important to bring the person in if you heard that something is going on, and I hope that our teens can trust us enough, Dulce, Gabby, Derek, and you guys too, that they can come up to you and be honest and tell you, I'm going through these, or I heard these of another kid. Can you please help me, understanding how do I resolve this? It's important that we also put it back on them so they can learn how to do it. So for me, it's like bring the person in, don't make it big, don't bring it outside other people to hear what's going on, but instead of working it out with the person.
That's what usually happens, mm-hmm. right? That you, instead of people bringing it in, they just tend to gossip about mm-hmm. it. And our experience is usually the people that need to know are the last ones to find out. Usually you find out when it's already gotten to a point where it's exploded, or there's people have gotten to a certain degree of animosity against each other that they don't want to come to church anymore or anything. So that's definitely true. You mentioned something, though. You said there's always going to be conflict. Why is there always going to be conflict?
First and foremost, we need to remember that we have different characters, right? And sometimes there's people that are very passive and they can be very calm, but it's other people that, as teens, I see that they're very excited. They're always trying to compete. So conflict becomes of one competition. And I think in maturity, even in adults, we have conflicts because we're not able to accept what we did wrong, but instead we want to fight back.
Isn't that the truth, though? Because when you look at a church and you see that conflict is always a part of a church. I think, like they say, the old adage, if you're looking for a perfect church and you think you found it, don't join it, because then you're going to ruin it for them, because there's no such thing as a perfect church. There really isn't. But I guess two things, because you mentioned about immaturity, and I think it's true, because both in the church in general, there's always going to be conflict. And it's sort of magnified even more in a youth group based on the fact that there's immaturity. They lack the experience. They lack the teaching from the Word of God and how to deal with things. They lack the courage too, because it's going to take courage to do the right thing. But what would you say, Esther, when it comes to the church in general, or the church body, whether it's youth group, whether it's the adult ministries? Do you feel like there's more conflict or less conflict than, let's say, a secular group, a secular club, a place where people gather for a community effort or whatever? Do you think there's more or less conflict in the church? And if so, why?
I think we might find that it's more because we have expectations. And we're quick to judge as well. You know what I mean? Like, we're expecting, like you said, with perfect church, but that doesn't exist. As simple people, we do it. And I think also, we've talked about this, Pastor. I think you preached this, where the devil does not like the church. He's going to do whatever to destroy, and whoever he can use to start, a conflict here, he's happy because he's doing that. And sadly, we get ourselves. we let the devil sometimes use us in those situations, and he's always going to attack us because he doesn't love the Lord. He's anti-God, and he's always going to want to bring that conflict in all different ministries because it's God's.
Yeah. Like I've said before, it's like when it comes to church, the devil doesn't miss a service. He's always here because he has nothing to gain with creating conflict in any other setting besides the church, because the church is where he has presented the most opposition to his mission and to his desires, right? So it fits within logic and within reason that this is where the devil is going to be seeding us with more reasons to have conflict among us. And I think it's true even in a youth group. But Hermana, maybe you can speak on this point. We love all our young teens, but sometimes especially the boys, let's speak for boys because I'm a boy. When we're young, sometimes we can be instigators, can't we? The boys like to instigate things, and we like to create little issues here and there. And that can be the truth with the devil. He's the one that's always here instigating and putting us in the right position for there to be conflict. So when it comes to conflict, you mentioned bringing him in, right? So what do you mean more by that, bringing them in?
So if I'm known of the problem, or if I'm told of a problem, I think it's important to hear both sides. Sometimes we, even as a mom, as a parent, having Natalia in the youth group, just because it's Natalia, my daughter, or Gabby, doesn't mean I'm going to take their side. I have to hear what happens. And, I think boys are more simple. They don't hang on stuff. They don't dwell on stuff. I think girls, on the other hand, and that includes us as an adult ladies too, we have this competition and we just want to be better. And I think that's not the character that Jesus had, right? So I think listening is very important, and allowing the person to say what they have to say. So I will bring one of, if it's a girl or two boys, whatever it is, two girls, I will bring one in and ask her what happened, tell me what happened, and then hear the other side to it. Of course, always, go to the pastor and say, well, this is what's going on. I need you to know. And then, whatever it takes to work with that young lady, because a lot of the times they come in Fridays, or I don't know what's going on at home. Their parents may not be Christians. So what are they saying to their parents? Are we believing? And I think something that I've always believe with the girls is like, I'm not always going to believe you guys. I want to go to your teacher and see if it's true that you're having an issue with, math, or if it's true that you're fighting at school. It's always good. And I think that's what parents, we lack. We think our kids are perfect. And by all means, they're not. So I think conflict, the only way to make it, to resolve the issue is talking about the issue. Yeah. And what can we do and what can I change and take my part, which a lot of times we don't want to take our part.
As the only parent here, Hermana, would you say is it impossible or is it just very difficult to be completely unbiased when it comes to a conflict involving your child? Because see, as a pastor, I don't have children, but I do deal with the problems. And sometimes, I find that's one of the things that's so hard for parents to do, to be able to see it dispassionately. And that's why, like certain situations, I just say, can I just resolve this with the persons involved and not with the parents there? Because I know the parents are gonna sort of like add fire to the situation, because they can't seem to see it unbiasedly and detach themselves from it. And it's like you said, it's true. You have to get both sides. Something they teach you in Christian counseling is that most of the time you listen to any issue to people, the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle, because everybody, even us, when we're talking about something that happened, we're going to say it with some innate bias towards what's going to benefit me or whatever. So it says whenever you're trying to resolve a conflict between two people, you listen to both of them and you try to find that middle. It's probably that's where the truth probably resides.
So I think I've always told my daughters, and even my husband, I said it takes two, right, to create a problem, or if you're not in accord because of something that happened. So I think it takes two to resolve it too. So I don't, and I know if Natalia was here today, she would say my mom is tough. My mom is,
I see it.
And you know
He's
what?
there on Friday, so he knows.
So not because it's Natalia or Gabby, I think it's unfair for the other kids to take, just because it's Hermana Margarita, she's going to take their side. And when I have to do it, I got to do it. And I have to take my part. And we'll talk it over, when we get home, okay, we'll have a little debate. But at the end of the day, you have to accept. And one thing that always I keep in my mind is when I see their lives, the girls, the boys, I don't know what kind of life they have at home. A lot of them don't have their parents. A lot of the kids don't have mom and dad coming to church. So they have struggled. They come here looking for something better. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect or anybody's perfect, but my job is to remember that God is watching me and that I'm going to have to give him an account of what I did. Yeah. So I can pretend, but the pretending is eventually going to come out, right? Yeah. It doesn't last too long. So, I think it, like you said, it's hard to keep that bias, but you need to remember.
Yeah. And when you said that, I actually reminded me that I was guilty on the other end with my niece. When I was in youth group, I was a youth pastor, and I used to be harder on her. Instead of being fair, because sometimes, like you said, you have to be fair. So some people might be easier on their relatives or their daughter or whatever. I was harder on my relative, and that was unfair to her, unfortunately. And I've told her that, because it was unfair, because I expected a certain behavior from her that I didn't expect from the others, and it's just, that's unfortunate. And being unbiased is so difficult. But as far as conflict resolution, that's why it's important to bring it hopefully to someone that would be unbiased, that hopefully would be able to deal with the situation.
Well, I think that there's also like an issue with the bias, but it has more to do, instead of like a familial tie, there can be a big bias with people who are I guess like the favorites. Of course, like as one of the youth leaders here, I have like the certain kids who I have considered to be some of my favorites because they are more akin to my personality. Like, I'm saying with air quotes, like air quotes favorites. I'm sorry, like I do my best.
Derek.
I do my best to be impartial with everything that I do. Like I tell people, I do my best to be impartial, and Hermana Margarita sees my efforts. Sometimes I might fail in my efforts, but you see my efforts, and I thank you for acknowledging them too. But there are times where I can be very upbeat and very supportive with one person, but then someone else does something similar in a good way, and then I'm just good job, and then that's it. And then if that favorite quote unquote does something wrong, I kind of let them slide, but then that same person, that someone else does the same thing, I don't let them have it. So it's difficult when there's that complex and invisible relationship that not even the leader knows about, that of favorites, of non-familial favorites, just
I think
behavioral
the
favorites.
better word would be relationship, what you said. It's not that you have favorites, it's that
Yes.
you're connected with some because either personality or you have something in common. And, you'll ask, let's pretend it's coffee. That's my thing, right?
Okay.
And there's someone who drinks, and we have that connection. So, every Friday, they'll be like, hi, Hermana, and you have that connection. It's not so much the favorite.
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
because you have that connectivity. That connection.
And then you can
that
sometimes
goes.
use that connection to let people slide. And, that's where we
you just-
might fail as
yeah,
leaders.
the importance of being careful and also managing. A relationship is so important anywhere, but especially in teens, because then you get to know them really well. And when you were talking about being harder than others, and that sometimes will come up because there's some that where they are spiritually, and they know and they continue doing it, in comparison to someone who's new and they didn't know about it, right? So there's also that extra layer to think about as you get to know your teens and having relationships and what their weaknesses and strengths are, and being able to use your maturity and the guidance of the Lord to know how to speak to them when things come up.
Yeah.
And I think one hardest thing that it has changed a little bit for me was girls automatically, especially, and I'm just going to refer to girls because boys are, they're in their own little world, right? Are it's Natalia's mom, so automatically they think was Hermana Margarita's, she's going to take her side, right? So it's a little hard. And then I have to kind of break through so I can win, right, their trust and be able to create a relationship and to let them know that I love them all, regardless of who I am. At the end of the day, when I'm standing there, I'm not Natalia's mom, right? Gotta wear my Hermana Margarita's hat, and just like Derek was saying, I don't think he has you don't have your own little group, but I hear you what you're saying, right? Some kids are more obedient, they're more easygoing, and it's easy to just
there's a deeper connection with those certain teens than there is with some other teens, unfortunately.
And I guess that's the point we're sort of making right now, is the importance when it comes to conflict resolution. Maybe we haven't gone through the steps of how you should do it, but as far as the leaders, that we're the ones presented with the problem. We're the ones presented with, Hermana, this is happening, so-and-so did this to me, or so-and-so did this to me. And like you said, bring him in, talk, try to bring them together. But I think as leaders, being unbiased, I think that's definitely one of those things you have to prepare for yourselves. Because also, recently I was talking about this with someone, and we're talking about how you also see the dynamics sometimes when there is a conflict between two persons. You see the dynamic also where you sort of try to win people towards your camp, that old
my side, your side.
Yeah, my side. Remember those series of those girl. I forget that there was a team so and so and team so and so, the Dracula.
Oh, Team Jacob, Team Edward.
Well, you would. I'm just kidding, brother. I don't know.
I'm in that generation. I'm sorry.
Until Derek said it, I was
called?
like, oh.
What was that show called?
It was a movie.
Twilight?
The Twilight Saga.
Yeah, remember how they had? I remember going to Burger King. You'd have team so and so and team so and so. That's what happens many times with two people that are in conflict. They try to find people to join their team, and they try it on leaders. They do try it out.
And I saw that. Unfortunately, I did see that within our own youth group. I remember a couple years ago, this was actually surprisingly a couple years ago. It's still present today, but it's not as much of an issue as it was a couple years ago. There was a clique issue within our youth group, and as leaders we can talk about that, but the teens, they don't see it until they start actually conflicting with each other. We saw that from afar, not afar, but like we saw that from like as the leaders, and we saw like some people were rallying toward this side, and including some of the leaders, not necessarily like as sides, but like they were being rounded up as it like a as I don't know, as like as much as a good leader could be rounded up to a side, and then other side there was another. It's rough
because at the end of the day, as leaders, we have to just be on the side of what's right.
Exactly, and that's the most difficult part of like being of the job. Like and like we all know this. We all been working we've all worked in the youth group at some point, or are continually working on it. Yeah. It's just like it's extremely difficult, especially as someone who's working new in the youth group. Like I've been in the youth group working in the youth group for a few years now, but it's still something like I still feel like I'm still new because like I see like other people who are like decades in the youth group or like decades in ministry, and like they're still having the issues. Like of course I'm still gonna have those issues too. It's just something that we as leaders, we as Christians need to continue working on and working toward. And whoever asked this question, please understand that we aren't intentionally trying to be against you or against your side or against what you're trying to bring up. That has never been the case, and we want to be as unbiased as possible.
Yeah. And that's the point we're making.
Yeah,
being unbiased is so important.
And it's complex because once you jump in with the immaturity, because trying to put myself in a 13, 14-year-old shoes, you expect something to happen right away. And that's the other thing about conflict, that you may never see what the resolution is, meaning you may never see, because once a conflict comes to the leaders and they have a conversation and they figure it out, they might not come back to you and say, well, this is what we're going to do, A, B, and C, especially if it's something major, right? They're not going to come back and tell you, well, we're going to do this, this, and this, and that. You know what I mean?
All they're coming to you for is to expect the other person to get in trouble. Or at least that's often what happens. A lot of the time you're gonna see like someone come up to you and like this person did this, and because it hurt me, that's why I'm telling you now. Basically all I'm telling you to do is punish them, please. But there's often a reason why there is that person happened, and like sure there can just be some bad actors. Sure, I'm not going to put that aside, but like it's just more often than not it isn't an uneven situation, and there is a biblical way to resolve it.
Most of the times there's, like they say, there takes two to tango. There's usually someone contributed something, and that's why it's important to take an unbiased position, hear both sides, and be fair, and tell them this is what you need to hear, and this is what you need to hear, and this is what the Lord says, and this is how you need to behave with each other. Because usually, there might be someone who starts it, but then the other one continues, and then it just becomes back and forth, and then it's well, he did it, but he did, or she did it, it just excuse your one bad action doesn't excuse the other, and that's what really has to do. I think also one of the things you mentioned, and one I wanted to touch on, was about also you said a lot of things might be going on at home, and when it comes to youth group, I was a youth pastor, so you know that, so I speak from experience that especially when dealing with conflict, you have to be unbiased, number one, but B, as leaders, we also have compassion, because sometimes we expect from them behavior that not even adults have mastered as Christians. To be honest, I mean, sometimes I see some adults still dealing with the very same issues that some of the teens are dealing with, except that they've learned to maybe hide it better, and hide it from the leader better. Well, the kids are like books, you could read it easily, you could see the conflict going on. But you have to have a lot of compassion when dealing with young people, because they're dealing with things, they're dealing with insecurities, they're dealing with no one loves me, and trying to find someone, peer pressure. Part of the reason little cliques happen is because they want to feel meaningful, they want to feel important to someone, and that's why I think the series we're going to be doing on identity is so important, because it all comes back to just that lack of true feeling of worth and value in God. And I mean, when we're secure in ourselves with God, then that's where a lot of these little problems go away. But that's not where they're at. And like I always tell parents when they come with issues and stuff, I tell them, this is to be expected in a youth group. We can't like be surprised. Especially I call it good problems, in a sense that that we could not have these problems in church if we didn't have a youth group. But because we have a lot of teens, because we have a lot of people, then there is going to be room for conflict, and that's just going to happen. So the true art comes in knowing how to deal with them, not in being surprised. Oh, there's problems. Oh, there's conflict. That's normal. That's people. That's humanity. And especially in a church, it's just knowing how to deal with it is going to be important.
But I think one last thing for me is like, they see what we do, right? As an adults, we have to be really careful. We can't preach one thing but act another thing, because one of the things the teens look up right away is, okay, well, it could be my parents, it could be the hermano or hermana, right? They do and they say one thing, and I hear it a lot in class, so I learn from them too, right? Just today it was about the prayer, but they were talking about, but what about when I see an hermana at church dressing like this, but outside saw her dressing like that, right? Just a simple thing. Sure. And then we have to be, because you were talking about integrity today, right? We got to be where we have to be. And then we have to own if we're making a mistake. When you tell a teen or a kid and you're honest to them, that's a different story. You open up to them, they're willing to trust you and talk to you. But when you're trying to be who you're not, then don't expect them to be somebody truthful when you're not even truthful. And I think that's what we need to remember as an adults, that we're modeling for our kids, for teens, right? And we got to be honest. I mean, even if it's not about liking hermana or hermano, it's about being mature and being able to say, well, I'm on this team. I decided to come to Vida Nueva, so I'm on Vida Nueva's team. I'm not against an hermano, hermana. It's not singular, right? It's the whole church. So I think we forget as an adult, unless we're working with ministry. I think that, and I think you can testify to that, Esther and Derek and Pastor, right? That teaches along the way. We're like, okay, gotta be the bigger person, and you forgive, and just move on, and it feels better. That's the way I feel.
Yeah, that question's one of those typical teen questions, But what about this, hermana, so and so? And sometimes teenagers ask those questions because they just want to maybe make an excuse for themselves. And yes, and there's going to be a lot of people that have bad testimonies. We've talked about this in the podcast before, and we have to put our eyes on Jesus. Of course, when it's a leader doing it, it's a different thing, because leaders, the privilege of leading in a church, whether a youth leader, whether you're an usher in the church or whatever, of course, if something's going on and they're dressing in a certain way that's inappropriate, that needs to be dealt with as well, But even then, we're still in the hospital, and that's what the teens need to remember, because that way they can also feel safer in being able to understand that they're not going to be perfect. They're going to have their issues, and that they need to be able to understand that they're in a church that hopefully they will be able to come up one day and say, hey, I have this problem, I have this issue, and I need to work on it. But as far as the conflict resolution, then maybe we should go into the biblical points. All right. So Matthew 18 is the main passage, the scripture. Jesus gives us the instruction on how to deal with conflict resolution. But I love that we went into a little bit of what we need to do as far as leaders when things are brought up to us. We need to be unbiased. We need to have compassion, that we're dealing with sinners just like us, and especially with teenagers, they're dealing with much more complex problems than us as adults, and we need to understand that they're coming from a point of sometimes insecurity, of problems in the home and stuff like that. But those steps are still the same. In Matthew 18:15, it says, moreover, if your brethren sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. Now, here's where it gets a little complex with teens, okay? Adults, that's what you should do. I think that's immediately, as adults, you have an issue with a problem with someone. Hopefully you have enough maturity that you can go up to the person in love, in peace, having prayed yourself. Esther mentioned that in one of the podcasts, praying yourself up first and being able to go and say, Monica, can I talk to you? This and this is going on. Why did you do this? Or I felt you disrespected me and this and blah, blah, blah. And be able to resolve it in a mature way, right? I always say the little anecdote from my church over there when I used to belong to San Carlos, that Mana Cristina, and she knows how I'm going to say this because we always kid around. She came up to me and told me, Pastor, you haven't talked to me for 3 weeks. Every time you come and I'm going to go say hi to you, you start walking in the other way. And she was mad. She's like, why? What did I do to you? Why are you showing me up that way? And I was caught off guard because honestly, I'm like, Hermana, I have nothing against you. I'm so sorry and everything. So now since then, that's been like 10 years already. Every time we see each other, Hermana, how are you? Sí, ya nos saludamos, you know. We always say, okay, now we already said hi. So sometimes a lot of resolutions will be misunderstandings, assumptions that are made,
disagreements,
and that's why as adults, hopefully, you would have enough maturity to take this first step. But how does this first step apply to teens? I'll open it up to you guys.
Can you read the verse one more time?
Yeah, let's read it again. It says, I lost it here. Verse 8, chapter 18, verse 15, it says, "Moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother."
I think that the way you have to deal with that is also just like having someone to like a leader to mediate that conversation, because like you can this happens in public schools all the time where like I have an issue with you and then a fight starts. Like it is going to be very different, like you said, with teens. But I think that the key thing is to have a trusted individual be there to mediate that conversation, and to be able to hear, like, even though both of them have their side, hear both sides and just like have it be as mediated as possible, because otherwise, like, immature people, like holiness can be surprisingly mature, but in some other aspects they might not be as mature as we would want them to be. So immature people will only come up with immature solutions.
What do you guys think?
No, I'm on the same boat. I think that inexperience is what I would say of how to handle things is really hard as a teen, because if you think about what their conflict resolution is up to that point, most of their experiences with their sibling, and your sibling is very different from when you are with friends, right?
Conflict
like
resolution.
Correct. Like those are two very different things, and I think the mindset is in that realm when it's different when you need to resolve it with a friend. So I do think that sometimes, or the majority of the times, teens do need an unbiased leader there, even if they're just listening, right? I think it cuts down on gossip. It cuts down on miscommunication. It just, all the little things that can come out of it if they do it on their own, you can actually cut a lot of things down. So you get to the heart of it, right? For them to say, you know, there was a misunderstanding or whatever it comes out to be. I think there's a little bit more hand holding there. Obviously, as they get older, hopefully they will learn that that's the best way, and they can do it on their own. But when they're young, I think that's important.
How do you think is the easiest way for a teen to get a hold of a leader in order to do that, to be to get an unbiased leader to help mediate a conversation?
Either way, either coming up to you and speaking to you and stuff, or texting you or whatever. Today, in the age of electronics, I actually like texts. I actually like emails because of also having a record, especially when it comes to any kind of conflict resolution with adults or teenagers, because you want to know and have something that you can prove, this is what I said. Because then it could get turned against you, and you said this or whatever. So I honestly, if someone were to tell me, okay, like the Bible says, there was no text or anything back then, but it says if it doesn't get solved on the one-on-one, take 2 witnesses and go and try to resolve it again. Why? Because that's the second part of those 3 steps. It's because you need to have people to know and hear and be able to be a witness of what was said. Because then, if not, sometimes when the person doesn't want to resolve and they just want to make it bigger, they go and add on to what was really said, or they make it, or they twist the words, and you as a conflict resolver end up in the problem, many times, and then you end up being part of the problem. So I think today, if it was me, I would hear them out and stuff, but maybe even use email, even use text.
Yeah, or even having two witnesses. Like, I have my teacher hat on. If I know of a student who is mature enough to know what they're doing and can twist and manipulate things, I would actually ask for two leaders to be there. Like me, if they came up to me and said, Hermana said, can you be there? And I know that person is known for manipulating, I'd be like, Hermana Margarita will be there too. Okay. Because I think that's so important for your protection and for the situation, as Pastor's saying. True. I think that is something extra, depends on the child, of course, or the young person, to be able to know enough to be like, oh, there's wisdom met in two witnesses instead. Because once, as you said, Pastor, once the parents get in, it can get really tricky from there.
I use that as with the adult ministry too. And Hermano Julio is my second always there in anything, because I've already had the experience where people but Pastor said this and this. I'm like, that's not what I said. And that's like, and then there's gotten some situations where there was serious discipline issues where I had to record the last meeting and just say, okay, we're going to meet, but I want you to know this is going to be recorded, because I don't want you to leave the church and then come and say this and this and this is what we did. I want it to be recorded so you know what we talked about and why you're choosing to leave the church and stuff like that, because unfortunately a lot of people sometimes they just sort of want to hurt the ministry and hurt things, but not so much in the teens. I think in the teens we're talking about little very small conflicts, which sometimes in their head they're really big, as well. So I think, so number one, try to deal with it with a leader, bring it together, and then the Bible says in verse 16, but if he's not will not hear it, take it with you or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuse to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuse even to hear the church, then let him be like a heathen and a tax collector. Now, this third one is meant more towards a serious sin issues, which I think is not really the issue in youth group.
It's not at the moment.
We're dealing more with the number 1 and 2 situations where we need to get them together. We need to talk it out. We need to tell them what's right. We need to be unbiased. And I think even when you're aware of a conflict going on with people, it's important that also your behavior outside of the classroom is also unbiased. And that's something I try to do with, especially when I know there's a conflict between 2 people, to always go and say hi to one, say hi to the other. Try to, hey, how are you? Good. How are you too? So that they know that they have not won me over to their conflict, because that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to, pastor believes me more than he believes her or him or whatever. So I think that's important too. So what happens if you get them together, you try to talk it out, and you set down the rules of this is how it needs to be, I don't want to see you guys doing this. What happens if they continue? Hermana, what would you do then?
I think I will bring you on board, right? I would like Pastor to know what's going on. I think it's important, but I think it's important to remember that not every kid or teens that comes to the youth group is safe. So exactly. That's very important to remember and to ask. Sometimes I have talked to kids and do we behave this and this is the way Jesus would would do it? Why? Is there something that we haven't understood? And sometimes we think everybody is safe, but we're not. So I think we have to deal in a different way with that person too. And one of the things that comes in mind that it's let's do discipleship. Let's understand that, we have to behave different, not because of me, but because of this is the way Jesus would like us to, So I think for sure I will bring Pastor, and I said, Pastor, and then, bring you on so what's going on. Because the kids have this competition, like Pastor said, we'll win. If it's Hermana, then because she likes me, she's close to my family. But if Hermana is mature, she should take that unbiased and say, no, let me speak to Hermana Margarita and then let's talk to Pastor about, right? So I think
would be almost like that third step, instead of bringing it to the church, because that's more like church discipline issues, is we bring it to the pastor, so that the teenager, so that the young person sees, hey, this is serious, and they're bringing in the main authority into this, so that they would hopefully that'll present as a freno, a break, to their behavior. Now, hopefully, most times, at least that will give it a pause. At least they will think about it, even if they're still struggling in their heart to forgive or to get along with the person. At least they know, and it's been established, this behavior is right and this behavior is not acceptable. Because like I was saying with someone recently, it's one thing to, okay, I don't like someone. It's another thing to actively trying to demean them in front of other people. And they need to know this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. You still need to learn to get along. You still need to love each other, pray for each other. If you don't like her, pray for her. Or if you don't like him, pray for him. But this is unacceptable. Next time this happens, there's going to be a consequence. Because that's how teenagers learn. That's how teenagers learn, by learning consequences and stuff. So I think that's the main answer. But what I would add, and anything else you guys want to add after that, but I would also add that once you've dealt with an issue, whatever the issue is, because sometimes some of the issues might bring out some stuff that might be like, whoa, I can't believe you were thinking that, or how much you hate her, or maybe you're dealing with something that you find out some things about some of our teenagers, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that. You have to continue loving them the same way.
Yep.
Absolutely.
You have to stop. Even if you were surprised about what you found out about them, you still have to love them the same way, because that can create a catalyst towards change, because they are going to realize, man, my so-and-so leaders, they found out that about me. They know exactly what I did, and yet they still love me the same way. And sometimes people think that as weakness, because it's like you're letting them get away without you showing them, now I hate you or whatever. It's not. That's how God deals with us. That He shows us truth. He puts the law down, but at the same time, He still loves us the same. And I think it's important with young people that they feel secure in our love, despite of anything that we might find out about them.
And I think that has to that doesn't go without like a consequence if there is a wrongdoing.
Exactly.
But if it were something about about a person, right? Like not necessarily something that they did, but more of something that they are doing, I guess. Like this is actually something you brought up multiple times when I was in Holiness. You brought up like if someone came out as a homosexual to me as a youth leader, I wouldn't fall out of my seat. Nothing would change. I would still love them the same way. And obviously there would be a counseling in that case, but there isn't necessarily like a punishment consequence for that. But if there is something like if someone started actively engaging and trying to pick fights with people, or if someone starting to confront aggressively someone else, then there would be consequence for that. Of course. And that stuff wouldn't be dismissed as if it were something else, as if it were it's just this guy, we just need to do that anyway. But the main point of it, that regardless of what it is, it doesn't matter what that situation is, we need to deal with everyone with the same love that we did before we knew of the conflict.
Amen. Lastly, I think just also, because we read the actual text of the question, we don't know who submitted it, and we don't know if it's from our church or not. But one of the things that was also sort of insinuated in the question was that maybe, I don't know if this person's church or if it's, I don't think it's our church. We already brought it up in our leadership. Nobody has heard of this kind of situation. But I think as leaders, it's important that if something is brought up, that we never just shove it under the rug. Mm-hmm. That's sort of what got insinuated in that question, and I would hope it's not about our church, but that's something as leaders we need to remember, that if something gets brought up, it's because it's important. It might not be important to us, but it's important to them, and we have to remember that, and then we need to consider it. We need to listen to their complaint. We need to go through the steps and not just shove it under the rug and hope it goes away, because it doesn't. It usually just grows and explodes later on. So I think that's important as well. Yeah. All right.
And I think that's a good place to close it. To whoever's listening, whether it's the person who asked the question, I keep on addressing you specifically because we can tell that with your initial question, there could have been something that you felt wronged in. Please don't be afraid to contact the church or contact us if you feel like you want to specify a little bit more. but if you can, find a leader that you can talk to, whether it is your parents, whether it is your church's youth group. It could be someone else that you already didn't talk to, because from the language that was submitted, it seemed like the last person you talked to kind of just shrugged it under the rug. If you want to talk to someone else that you trust, please go ahead and do so. Talk to or if you can, talk to the person you're having the conflict with. Have you both come find a witness or find someone to talk to and have a mediated conversation. That is one of the best ways biblically to resolve a conflict. Thank you for joining us in this conversation, everyone. We appreciate every listener. We appreciate everything you guys, all the listens we keep on hearing. That like, oh, we love the episode. So we appreciate that. Thank you for joining us in Deeper Roots, and I hope that you join us next week for our next conversation. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Deeper Roots. If you want to submit a question, follow up on something we talked about on the podcast, or you want to find us online, you can go to our webpage, which is IBBVN.org/deeperroots. Deeper Roots is a ministry of Iglesia Bíblica Baptista Vida Nueva, which is a local church in Castro Valley, California. And you can learn more about us and our church by going to our website, IBBVN.org.